be a lot of focus on job creation and tech as well. Sakshi, that definitely appears to be something that you think will be a priority. Too many protests have happened in the past few days. Unemployment is becoming a concern with young men and women. So job creation and specifically, I think, skilled opportunities, skilled initiatives will be important for a modern economy, Sakshi.
Absolutely. And Pooja, you know, this time around, the government is actually going to be nudging the private sector to do some investments, which has been lacking.
Interesting.
If you look at the kind of growth that we've got in the Indian economy, that's on the back of public spending, huge capex that we were just talking about. It's been the private sector that's been in the backseat. They have not invested, and therefore the jobs which otherwise could have been created have also been faltering. This time around, even in the economic survey, they're pointing out to that the conditions are now stable after COVID-19. Economies that are firm footing. You can actually look ahead at the growth figures and therefore start to invest more. The moment the private sector will invest more in creating capacities, in creating more manufacturing jobs, ultimately the jobs will start to flow in as well. So it's not just going to be the government that is going to be fully taking that responsibility of creating all that job. Of course, the baton lies with them, but they are also going to be looking forward that tripartite partnership with the public, with the private sector as well this time around. Second of all, you did talk about how the tax structure is going to be playing an important role. This time around, from the budget, there are huge expectations that some tax reforms should be underway. Tax relief should be given to the middle class that has been reeling under the inflationary pressures. How do you provide that? Now, of course, there are two regimes. Remember, we've been already getting signals from the last 2 to 3 budgets that the finance minister wants that the old tax regime should slowly and gradually fade away. It will be the new tax regime that is the focus. Previous budget, there was a lot of changes in the tax slabs. A lot of tax rates were rationalized. You have more slabs now, and every 5 to 10 lakh rupees of annual income, you do have a next bracket right here. But there is a call for a basic exemption, tax exemption limit to be enhanced. Currently stands at 2.5 lakhs for the old tax regime, 3 lakhs for the new tax regime.
That option still stands.
The option still stands. But I am, personally, I believe there will not be any changes in the old tax regime because ultimately the government may want to shift the entire population to the new tax regime, and therefore their focus will be to, make the new tax regime more attractive. They did some changes in the last time around as well. This time, if they enhance the basic exemption limit from 3 lakhs to 4 lakhs, that will be an added on advantage.
Also, you know why I think this budget is going to be different? It may be 3.0, but this is also the sort of elections that we have seen, the coalitions that have come in. Politics already has erupted over this, and that's where the opposition is jumping on this time. While all eyes will be on Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, set to present the union budget. Record 7th time, remember, including the interim budget. Ahead of that budget speech that we're expecting in just a short while, Congress Lok Sabha members of Parliament are ready to hold a meeting. This will be at 10:30 a.m. at the CPP office today. Congress has already targeted BJP-led NDA government. They are alleging budgets are crafted to profit certain business honchos, and they've named Ambani and Adani on this as well. So let's listen in to what Prime Minister Modi had said earlier.
चुने हुए सभी सांसदों का कर्तव्य है, सभी राजनीतिक दलों की विशेष जिम्मेवारी है कि हमने दल के लिए जितनी लड़ाई लड़नी थी लड़ ली। अब आने वाले 5 वर्ष के लिए हमें देश के लिए लड़ना है, देश के लिए जूझना है, एक और नेक बनकर के जूझना है। मैं सभी राजनीतिक दलों से भी कहूंगा कि आइए हम आने वाले 4 साढ़े 4 साल दल से ऊपर उठ करके सिर्फ और सिर्फ देश को समर्पित होकर के संसद के इस गरिमापूर्ण मंच का हम उपयोग करें।
All right, viewers, and now we have Rahul Gautam, our colleague, with us right from the Vijay Chowk, where all the action is unfolding, and you will see, a lot of, action, cars moving towards the North Block, finally getting ready to present the budget at the Parliament as well. I'll come to you, Rahul, with the understanding of how do you see this budget different from the last 10 budgets that we have actually seen from the Modi government. This time around, it is the first budget under the coalition-led government. government. So this is going to be a lot of focus as to will there be coalition pressures? Will the government actually have to tilt the populism way and also listen to what their coalition partners are saying rather than staying their own course? What are you hearing?
Well, absolutely. You rightly pointed out that since this time it's a coalition government, then you can expect that the BJP will certainly be accommodating and adjusting the concerns or grievances of the alliance partners as well. For example, we all know that how JDU and TDP, they both have been seeking, the special status for the respective states, that is Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, or at least special packages for these two states. Now, how BJP is going to accommodate these demands, we have to really wait and watch in the budget. But the opposition has been decrying that how this has been a jobless growth in last 10 years, how enough jobs are not being created. If you look at the economic survey as well, economic survey also says that we have to create at least 80 lakh jobs per annum in non-farming sectors so that we can hold on to the working population. So clearly, we have to really wait and watch that how Nirmala Sitharaman would be walking this tightrope and how she is going to accommodate all the concerns of the alliance partner, at the same time keeping aspirations of the common man also high, because we all know that how common taxpayers are also seeking tax reliefs, tax respites. The Congress party, in fact, is going to deliberate at 10:30 as to how they're going to corner the government on the issue of budget. In fact, yesterday
also,
only they
not
said...
just, correct, it's not just the coalition partners, because that's where their already pressures are coming in, but also with regard to the opposition, they are targeting the NDA as well. Stay on with me, all our colleagues, and we'll come to you in just a short while. Look at this. Record 7th budget that's going to be presented by Nirmala Sitharaman. How it started from 2019, 2020, when it was the longest speech, Sakshi, right? And then the next few years, including the interim budget before the elections, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you can actually see how colorful the entire screen looks with her nice Kanjivaram saris that she has been wearing, from yellow to pink to red.
And also,
of course,
sorry to interrupt, but briefcase to Bahi Khata.
Absolutely.
That's the transformation we have seen. All right, so we'll go.
The first one, it was a red cloth, covering the papers, but then it turned digital for the last 3 years.
That's true. It's
that
turned
talks
digital
about the
too.
digital economy.
So a lot of changes are happening. Sakshi and I continue to bring you updates. After a very short break, stay tuned. What will we have for 2024-25 for you and I, for farmers, industrialists, all that and more after a break.
Advisor.
Telecast this morning only on India Today. We bring you all the live updates, expectations, promises and the coalition pressures of the big budget day. Sakshi Batra and I, Pooja Shali, continue to bring you the latest. Let's first take a look at the headlines. Bharat ka budget 3.0. Nirmala Sitharaman set to present the budget today at 11 a.m. Will there be tax relief for the Aam Aadmi? It's a big hope for farm and agriculture sector.
Ahead of Modi 3.0's big budget, India's real GDP grows in FY24. GDP higher than pandemic levels. Economic survey signals resilient growth. But all eyes will be not only on the budget speech, but the coalition pressures, the opposition attack, Modi's debate, not disrupt pitch. Congress hurls the Adani-Ambani jibe. Trinamool and the Congress call the government unstable.
As all eyes are on Modi Budget 3.0, India's top business team in action. Fastest budget updates, cutting-edge data analysis, only on India Today.
In other international news, White House race heats up. All eyes will be on Vice President Kamala Harris, who could now become the presidential nominee too. Kamala's first speech since Biden exit. Kamala appreciates President Biden, calls Biden legacy unmatched.
Breaking news coming in, all eyes on Mega Modi 3.0 budget. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to present the Modi 3.0 budget. Will there be tax relief for the Aam Aadmi? Can Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman tame the rising costs and inflation for the common man?
All right, so that's the big news coming in. All eyes will be on Nirmala Sitharaman. Remember, because this is going to be historic in so many ways. The woman you're looking at, not only the first finance minister, but also she's already scripting history. 7th straight budget for Nirmala Sitharaman today for the fiscal 24-25. And this, remember, basically also beats the record of former Prime Minister Morarji Desai. He had served as the finance minister 1959 to 64 and presented 5 full budgets and 1 interim budget. Sakshi, all eyes, of course, while there is a lot of technical jargon that you will keep us updated with, but my focus and, basically the Aam Aadmi expects some relief in tax, some relief in perhaps housing and other loans. Do you think that's going to be the focus today as well?
Well, of course, it has to be, because just this budget comes right after the general elections,
yes,
where you actually have seen the depleting Modi capital. And that is going to be the focus of the union budget today, as to how they appease to the large population of India. The big question is, will they continue to be fiscally prudent? Will there be a balancing act that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman do very well today, prioritizing growth? Or will she also appease to the larger public by actually giving them some tax relief, some relief for the common man who's been reeling under the pressure of rising inflationary costs?
That's true, because if the GDP is rising, so is inflation as well in the past few years. So the focus will be Modi 3.0 budget. Remember, if you've returned for the straight third term, what is it that you have for different sectors? While there will be, of course, perhaps different business honchos who will be expecting certain relief, eventually it will be about the Aam Aadmi. So it's raining expectations, especially for the middle class, and all-important income tax slab that all of us will be focusing on. But Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is all set to unveil the first budget of Modi 3.0 in just a short while. 7th consecutive budget, making her the second finance minister to achieve this feat after C.D. Deshmukh. The budget is crucial. It sets the tone for the government's economic policies and priorities. Also expected to give a push to initiatives in various segments of the economy in line with the Viksit Bharat 2047 vision, because that's the focus of this Modi government. Amid all of this, let's listen in now to some of the reactions coming in. Let's start first with Prime Minister Modi himself.
ये बजट अमृत काल का एक महत्वपूर्ण बजट है। हमें 5 साल का जो अवसर मिला है, आज का बजट हमारे उन 5 साल के कार्य की दिशा भी तय करेगा। और ये बजट 2047 जब आजादी के 100 साल होंगे, तब विकसित भारत का जो हमारा सपना है, उस सपने को पूरा करने की मजबूत नींव वाला बजट लेकर के हम कल देश के सामने आएंगे।
All right, so there you heard it from the Prime Minister. He is hoping for a historic budget that will be for the Viksit Bharat. Let me now go across to our reporter who's been covering the developments at the North Block at the Finance Ministry, Karishma Sudani, now joining in. Karishma, very good morning to you. Action already picking up at the North Block. I can see you talking to a lot of people right there. Do tell me, what is the mood right now? Of course, the nation has a long list of wish lists and expectations. Will the Finance Minister be able to give some relief to the Aam Aadmi while also staying on the fiscally prudent path this time around? What's your scene?
Sakshi, this budget is going to be a revised budget and could be a big bang budget, noting that last 5 budgets have missed big bang announcements, especially for the middle class on the tax cut. It looks like government is going to look at fiscal consolidation along with some relief for sectors in order to uplift the economy. You saw the Echo survey numbers yesterday, a 6.5 to 7%, quite a conservative growth target that they have set. It looks like they're pretty confident on the fiscal consolidation path on what they're going to do in terms of macroeconomics. Their fiscal deficit could further go down. They could try and aim for further increase allocation towards certain social schemes. They could also look at higher direct and indirect taxes owing to the buoyancy on the revenue side. But when it comes to the people of India, to the middle class sector, it is very well on cards that there could be some cushioning done on the income tax front today. What is going to be interesting is to watch out for if government is going to try and bringing any kind of further exemptions or relief under the new regime, because that has been their focus now. While for corporate there has been some good news recently, but for the individual salaried taxpayer, it's always been a set of disappointments for the last few budgets, but looks like this could pave way for some kind of green shoots in a way that there could be some relief on cuts.
Let's also listen in now to some experts because, in the past few days, specifically since yesterday, since the economic survey, there's been a lot of chatter, a lot of discussion. India Today's Rahul Kanwal exclusively spoke to V. Anant Nageshwaran, Chief Economic Advisor, on the big expectations this budget. Let's listen in.
What you think really ought to be done to deal with the jobs challenge? We are hearing a lot about employment-linked incentives, ELIs, to complement the production-linked incentives, that companies should have incentives so that when they hit a certain number of employment creation, then they get incentives. Do you think that's one way of potentially addressing this challenge? How do you think the job crisis should be dealt with?
No, there are multiple interventions that can be undertaken with the aim of creating employment. But it is a function of continued economic growth. It is a function of corporate sector's investments. It is a function of the real estate markets doing well, which creates construction jobs. So there are multiple touch points that have impact on employment. From the point of view from the government action, of course, the survey has mentioned the importance of deregulation as a very important aspect that frees up entrepreneurial resources, both time and in terms of financial, to be able to create employment. The second aspect is employment is also influenced by long-term transformations like technological developments. And that is where the corporate sector also has to find the right balance between capital share at work and labor share at work in their businesses. And we showed that corporate profits have gone up in the aggregate by nearly 4 times between FY20 and FY23. Therefore, there is more room for them to hire workers, create incomes for them, which feeds back into better demand for their own products. And so I think the answer to your question is that employment generation is a matter of good, appropriate skilling, where government, private sector, academia have to come together. And employment creation is a matter of easing operating conditions for businesses, especially small and mid-sized businesses. And third, employment generation is a matter of how corporates and commercial businesses deploy technology to the extent that they are labor augmenting rather than labor displacing.
Dr. Nageshwaran, in the economic survey, you also write about the challenges posed by artificial intelligence particularly to India's service sector exports. Just now you spoke about the need for deregulation. In the survey you write about deregulation at the local, the state and the central level. I want to understand from your framework the potential you think having a coalition government, rather than a government with a full majority, a coalition government and fractious federal relations, all these having on the prospects for deregulation. A, what kind of deregulation do you have in mind? And do you think we're now in a fractious coalition framework could push back some of the economic reform? Dr. Nagesh.
First of all, these are actions that can be taken suo motu by state governments, and whether we have a full majority government or a coalition government is not a factor in this, and state governments in the past have indeed done so with respect to business facilitation legislations, presumptive approvals, etc. So it is possible. And that doesn't depend on the kind of governments we have over here at the union government level. And as to what kind of regulations they are, we have given some examples in the survey chapter. See, ultimately it comes in having too many prescriptive rules for businesses. I mean, there are several legislation that prescribe even the amount of space that businesses have to allocate for receiving inventory, raw material inventory, production space, and finished goods inventory, etc. So it's important to move away from such prescriptive rules to principle-based regulations, especially when it comes to non-financial businesses. That is the kind of direction in which we have to move towards. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, I mean, it is still a work in progress in terms of understanding the implications it has for labor market, for employment generation. But it is very important for Indian point of view to make a distinction again between areas where it can expand employment, and for that what kind of preparatory work we need to do, and also understand that ultimately the cost of artificial intelligence cannot simply be measured in terms of productivity gains and bottom line gains for the corporate sector, because ultimately if it is going to be creating adverse impact on employment generation and income growth, it does feed back into the corporate sector in terms of lower demand and lower sales growth for themselves. So I think all countries are struggling with finding the right balance between deployment of new technologies and their implications for employment markets, job markets, and it has also got implications for the share of income accruing to capital in terms of profits and share of income accruing to labor. So I think over time, we have to figure out, depending on the kind of impact it has, well, a mix of carrots and sticks and incentives and disincentives may need to be adopted to ensure that the social balance is not unduly disrupted.
So through the day, remember, there's going to be a lot of numbers that are going to come in from the budget. So let me first begin this telecast about the numbers we need to know, which are already existing. For example, the GDP. Because with regard to the GDP in here, with the dashboard that we have, precisely we're going to focus on, let's try and understand how GDP has been, because this is what India takes a lot of pride in, specifically for how we've been stable compared to other countries. So it was how 6.8 in 2018 and how we did see a dip for a while. But during the COVID pandemic, when the world economies were crashing, India managed a certain stability. We faced some fluctuations, but witnessed a peak when it came to 2022 to about 9.7. These were the years when even the International Monetary Fund said the only bright spot on the dark horizon is India. Now it has come to 8.2 by 2024, but observers maintain this is not really a massive fluctuation. This is more about normalizing after the peak that we have witnessed, with the fact that there's been a certain stability all through these years and with a forecast of 6.8. If you want to understand the comparison, I want to then tell you how the world economies have reacted. This is how, where India has stood. Look at China. Look at Japan, United Kingdom, USA, Europe. So primarily the first 5 to 10 big economies of the world. And while India is at 5th right now, heading toward 3rd, but to manage a certain GDP and with the population, with the land area that we have, this has been, of course, a very important factor. But when there's a high GDP, so to say, we're also facing a high inflation. And facts suggest how there has been a peak, a certain dip in the past few years, but there was a rise that we saw in 2023, but there's been a slight dip that we have seen about 5.4 in 2024 and then a forecast down. All of this is possibly going to decide how different sectors will have budget allocations taking place. And that's where I bring in Sakshi. Sakshi, so there's been a lot of fluctuation, especially because of the COVID pandemic. How do you think this is now going to become a huge responsibility on the shoulders of Modi government 3.0, that with the third tenure, you have to come across as someone who can make a lot of difference with the global GDP as it stands and also cater to the masses?
Absolutely, Pooja, you're right over there, because while we are taking pride in being the fastest growing major economy in the world, a lot of criticism has flown in for the Modi government that this growth has actually been unequal, because there has been a K-shaped recovery where the top of the pyramid has been only seeing the growth, bottom of the pyramid has only been seeing some kind of a fall. So we need to get to inclusive growth, whether the growth parameters as set by the economic survey yesterday, they are projecting a growth rate of 6.5 to 7%. And they're saying that, V. Anant Nageshwaran clearly mentioned that he's not being cautious about the economic growth in India, but he's being prudent at this point in time, that on the back of structural reforms, continued policy reforms that we are seeing from the government, this growth rate could be maintained. And if we are able to sustain above the 7% growth rate mark, that's going to be a big achievement in itself. And of course, you've already compared it with the world as to where we stand strong as well. So very important growth figures. The outlook on growth will be very important from the finance minister, and inflation, which is a very, very big pain point. If you look at it, you've been talking about it all through on India Today as well, as far as 100 rupees a kilo for tomatoes. All of these vegetable prices have been soaring, so it's the food inflation that is the pain point. And we do need from the budget today some agri reforms that could aid infrastructure for agriculture. We also need reforms when it comes to storage and warehouse facilities. That is lacking, which is also linked to higher food inflation right now, and that is the need of the hour. Because of the climate change, there is unseasonal rainfall that impacts the agricultural produce. That is where we need the government's focus and the incentives for the farmer as well. If these two things are catered to here, it's going to be a very welcome budget as well. And now, viewers, we are going to be taking you to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's residence. We also have Piyush Mishra now joining in on the broadcast to help us understand what exactly is going to be expected from now until 11 a.m. when the final budget is presented in the Parliament. Piyush, go on and tell us, how do we see the events unfolding in the next couple of hours? You're at the residence. What kind of activity you're seeing there?
Well, absolutely, till 11 o'clock, it's going to be a busy schedule for Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. In a few minutes from now, she will be leaving from her residence, which is at Safdarjung Road, and then from here, she will directly go to the Ministry of Finance, and there she is going to hold a couple of meet with her colleagues and a few officials, few bureaucrats here at the Ministry of Finance. After that, she will go to President's house, where she will get a nod from a President to table the budget. That is a customary thing which happens every time whenever the budget is tabled. After meeting with President, she will then go to Parliament House, where the cabinet meet is also to take place around 10:15, and then the cabinet will pass the budget, and then the budget would be tabled at around 11 o'clock. There are various things if we talk about this time's budget. Remember that it's going to be the first budget of third consecutive NDA government. Also, this budget is going to outline the roadmap for Viksit Bharat Vision 2047, about which the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also been talking about. But what is more important here is that this time the government will have to cater to the demands of the NDA allies. Remember that JDU, TDP and other parties have been seeking special package. In fact, their primary demand was special status for Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, but now we are also seeing as to how they are more focusing on special package. So the BJP government, NDA government will have to in fact cater to the demand of NDA allies also. But before that, there is a customary thing which has to be followed before tabling the budget. I am right now present in front of Nirmala Sitharaman's residence, and you can see that security has also been beefed up right in front of her residence. Few barricades have been put here. In few minutes from now, she will be leaving from that particular place, and then will directly go to Ministry of Finance, where she is going to hold a meeting with her colleagues, with few senior officials of Ministry of Finance, and then after that she will go to President House, and after meeting with President of India, she will then move towards the Parliament House, and before entering in Parliament House, she is also going to show the tablet through which she will be presenting the budget. So it's going to be a busy day for Nirmala Sitharaman. At around 11 o'clock, she is going to table the budget. Remember that the budget would have some sort of expectations. There are tax reliefs which the common man is also asking for. Remember that yesterday the economic survey was also tabled by Finance Minister, and it has forecast 6.5 to 7% growth rate, and it is a document which is also...
And as we look at these images of Nirmala Sitharaman, Sakshi, I cannot help but think of the past tenure, 7 budgets that she's presented. Her hair has turned from black to grey to white. You know, that is the kind of pressures of the job also that are seeing.
And experience.
And experience that comes with it. So, of course, grey hair, you know, it represents wisdom in so many ways. But also the saris, I can't help but mention here, are always the focus. These are, of course, on the sidelines. But what is she going to choose?
And also, how long will the budget speech be?
Yes.
She has to herself...
What has been the longest?
I think she herself had the longest in 2020.
Yes.
You know, the speech that was closer to about 2 hours.
2 hours, correct.
Yes, that's what we had. And I think the, shortest speech was in the history is just about 50. And last time also, she just gave about a 56 minutes speech, which was the interim budget. I think her shortest speech.
That's the 56 minutes. So about an hour was the shortest speech. So there are going to be a lot of sideline factors as well. I'm waiting to see if it's going to be a red-orange sari. That will give me a side point, Sakshi. All right. So should we look at what the industry experts also are saying? So you tell us about what is the mood in the industry right now, Sakshi?
So right now, I think there are 3-pronged focus. One is whether the government will be able to propel demand in the Indian economy as of now, spur consumption that has been faltering, especially the rural consumption, and which is why we do hope that this time around a lot of rural-focused reforms could be at play to revive the consumption in the rural areas. So that could be at play. And the third one is jobs, and to also spur investments in the country as well. Jobs, you already know, has been something where the government has been faltering, has been facing a lot of flack of late. Now, whether it comes through, reforms for gig economy workers, for the domestic workers, if at all, maybe from Manrega, if there is a higher allocation for the rural employment scheme as well, we do not know. But something has to be done at this point in time to cater to that, faltering unemployment.
And it has to be a mix for the agriculture sector and for the industries, because that's how India has been. It's a mix of both. It's not one either. So let's listen in then, Sakshi, to the industry experts voicing their opinion, and all our colleagues at Business Today constantly interacting with them. Here's what industry experts have to say.
एक्सपेक्टेशन है इस बार एग्रीकल्चर भी बेटर करेगा, सर्विसेज सेक्टर में भी कुछ बढ़त होएगा, और ग्लोबल ट्रेड जो एक नेगेटिव टेरिटरी में था पिछले साल -1.2, इस बार WTO का एस्टिमेट है कि 2.2% के आसपास होएगा. सो ऑल दीज आर पॉजिटिव्स. सो इसके कारण और साथ में एक्सपेक्टेशन ये भी है वेरी क्लियरली कि जो एक रिफॉर्म की जर्नी थी, पॉलिसी इंटरवेंशंस जो काफ़ी सालों से हो रहे हैं जिससे बेनिफिट आया है, वो पॉलिसीज नीतियाँ सिर्फ कंटिन्यू नहीं होंगी, मतलब जैसे पब्लिक कैपेक्स वगैरह का, प्लस ऑल्सो नई पॉलिसीज एरिया जहाँ पे रिफॉर्म करना है उस पर और काम होएगा, और जो रिफॉर्म्स हैं कुछ जिसमें नेक्स्ट लेवल ऑफ इम्पॉर्टेंट रिफॉर्म्स जो हैं उसमें स्टेट्स भी इन्वॉल्व हैं, जैसे एग्रीकल्चर है. इकोनॉमिक सर्वे में भी एग्रीकल्चर के बारे में बात किया था कि हाई ग्रोथ के लिए ऑल्सो इम्पॉर्टेंट है कि एग्रीकल्चर परफॉर्म करे. तो उसमें रिफॉर्म लाने के लिए लेबर हो गया, आपका ये लैंड हो गया, पावर सेक्टर हो गया, तो ये सब रिफॉर्म्स के लिए एक प्लेटफॉर्म बनाया जाए कंसेंसस के लिए, ताकि इनमें भी रिफॉर्म लाया जाए, ताकि ये जो अभी देखिए इकोनॉमिक सर्वे से ये भी क्लियरली पता लगता है कि इकोनॉमी में बहुत पॉजिटिव्स हैं.
I'm looking forward to an extremely progressive budget which will address economic growth, on multiple fronts. You know, the government has done a lot. We have to acknowledge it and accept that. The PLI scheme hopefully will kick off further. The investment into infrastructure will help grow, which it'll help access. From a healthcare perspective, there's a lot more to be done. We still do not have enough hospital beds to treat the kind of people who need to be treated. Both private sector and public sector must come together, work together to do more, and I'm sure that the budget will facilitate many such activities. I'm also looking forward to an investment into development of human resources, human manpower. Last time, of course, they did into nursing colleges, which was a welcome move. But there is so much more to be done, and I'm hoping that there will be a focus on the health sector, which I think if it's done now, it will give back returns like the IT sector did for India a long time ago. So it is a very valuable sector, and being worked in that for 40 years, a lot can be done to help economic prosperity of the country, and I'm looking forward to that.
What are your expectations from the Karnataka, from the central government for Karnataka in terms of startups and innovations?
Look, startups have a small set of demands. Please do away with the angel tax. The angel tax was introduced by Pranab Mukherjee long back because it appears that in the neighboring state, one politician is getting money at a premium in his companies. Please abolish that. It's been a source of harassment. And I want to put on record, March of this year, I had a call from 3 startups who said their cases were picked up because they got investment. Calls came from somebody because faceless. They asked for a bribe. And they refused to pay a bribe. And they put a high tax on them. Who cares? They don't care. There's no penalty for doing wrong assessments. It has become a source of harassment for young people. And what are you trying to do? All the people who invest by check. They got a PAN number. So the income tax officer can always go check up the PAN number and see whether they invested accounted money. If I put my accounted money, why is anybody asking what valuation? When you come to me with a PPT, how are you going to value the company? The income tax officer have a special skill that any valuer have a skill. The PPT, I talk to them, I tell them, okay, they ask for a valuation, I agree, I don't agree, I negotiate. And then put in conditions like liquidity preference. That means anytime sale, money first come to me. And that's how I protect myself. That's how it is done. They want a valuation certificate. Then they say, why didn't you meet those numbers? What kind of numbers? There's risk in the business. Then they go add back. The harassment has to stop. Prime Minister Modi said, Digital India, Stand Up India, Start Up India. And he has done a lot. But the bureaucracy and the finance ministry is just not agreeing to the harassing. I don't know how much tax will they collect from this. They got Section 66. For unaccounted money coming in there. They got strong law. They got Form 826. Everything is there in the control. They want to harass. I met them many times. Industry has met them. Everybody has met them, pleaded. They laugh at your face. We met the FM many times, given petitions. Nothing happens. You go meet the FM, she'll just listen to nothing happen. They don't care.
I think that specifically travel and tourism के point of view से अगर देखा जाए तो government already बहुत अच्छा खासा focus उन्होंने travel and tourism में दिया ही है. जैसे मैंने पहले बताया कि हमारे ऑनरेबल प्रधानमंत्री उन्होंने बताया कि कैसे हम कॉन्फ्रेंस टूरिज्म यहाँ बढ़ा सकते हैं. पूरे वर्ल्ड में कोई ऐसी कंट्री नहीं है जो ये बोल सकते हैं कि हम अगले 1 दशक में हम 100 एयरपोर्ट नहीं लेकर आएंगे. तो इंडिया में ही ऐसी चीज़ें हो सकती है और मुझे लगता है कि ट्रैवल एंड टूरिज्म अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ा सेक्टर है जो अभी थोड़ा सा नेग्लेक्टेड था.
All right, so there you heard it from the industry experts. Big, long list of wish lists and expectations coming in right there. We'll just have to wait by and see how many of those really make it to the final union budget. But there are many key numbers that we will be watching out for from the budget speech. And which are these numbers? I'm going to be highlighting just right here. First up will be the Manrega allocation, which if you see from FY16 onwards, it's been on the rise from 44,000 odd crore rupees. In FY18, it went up to 63,600 crore rupees as well. We also saw, an uptick slightly to about 68.2 thousand crore rupees as well. As far as FY20 is concerned, there was a big spike in FY22 when you saw the number going up to 106,000 crore rupees, but there has been a decline. In FY24, the figure was 82,000 crore rupees, and in FY25, there's an expectation that there'll be a slight jump. basis on what was allocated on the interim budget front. 86,000 crore rupees is what you can see on Manrega. This will ensure that the per day wages of the rural employees is heightened at some extent, and of course rural employment is also increased. But the second important figure will be on the capex front. This government has been very prudent when it comes to a capex-led growth. We have been seeing a bump up as far as the capex allocation is concerned. The capital allocation, which means for roads, highways, that continues to be on a rise. It continues to be breaking records after records in the last 5 years. And now if you see, some part of it will be allocated to the roads and the highways ministry. We've actually seen a consistent rise in the kilometers of highways that have been constructed over the last few years. From FY19 to FY24, you actually see a steady rise in the national highways construction. That is definitely prompting all of us to really understand how the connectivity across India, and that spurs the logistics sector and the overall economic growth with respect to the connectivity is concerned. And of course facilities for you and I as a common person as well. So that will be important to see what booty does the Ministry of Roads and Highways really get. We've been hearing all statements from Nitin Gadkari, who's been talking about how he has been looking at record-breaking speed of highways construction in India. So that is something that we'll be watching out for today.
Very interesting, Sakshi, because what you're telling us is also what India truly is about. It is about the agriculture sector. So there will be expectations from the Kisan Samman Nidhi or Prime Minister or PM Kisan Yojana, which possibly will have some announcements. Will there be an increase in some amount for the farmers as well? Because remember, when we talk of agriculture, we talk of youth, women, men, farmers, poor. So it is a combination of many factors. And then there are the highways. You need, with a modern economy, with developing economy that we are, to also have the amenities, facilities, because the tax that we pay, we of course want to see the result on the streets where we drive. All of that will be crucial, and this combination is going to be very interesting. So what does the government have up its alley right now? I'm going across to my colleague Anmol Bali. Anmol Bali is outside MOS Finance, Pankaj Chowdhury's residence. Anmol, it's a big day, a lot of expectations. When are you expecting MOS Finance to leave? What kind of activity right now outside his residence?
Pooja, currently I am here outside the residence of Pankaj Chowdhury, MOS Finance, and as you can see behind me, the media is covering him because today is his big day. Today Nirmala Sitharaman is going to present the first budget of Modi 3.0 government. This will be her 7th consecutive budget, and she will be breaking and surpassing the record of Morarji Desai, who presented around 5 annual budgets and 1 interim budgets. And soon minister will be leaving his residence. He will be going to finance ministry. He will be talking with the officers, with the finance minister. He will be assisting finance minister for her big day for the budget session, and various experts are thinking that this time government will be main focusing on the infrastructure, railways, as well as on the poor, women, unemployed, as well as on the research sector and various other sectors. They will ask the private sector to inject money into the research sector and as well as into the infrastructure. Pooja.
Okay. Anmol, keep track of the latest that's coming in, because it's going to be eventually about what our policymakers have decided. And that will then craft the future, isn't it, Sakshi, of the next 5 years at least of the Sarkar, and as much for the nation. What do you think precisely has been the response, Sakshi, from the economic survey that was titled? Because there's already been a lot of chatter about it too.
Absolutely. So, Pooja, of course, it's been very prudent, and with the way it has projected about the growth, the structural reforms that have been undertaken, the clear verdict was the Indian economy is at a steady, stable footing, and that's a big to our credit. And of course, the message comes in, if we continue on the policy front, if we continue to do the structural reforms that we've been following on, it will not be impossible to achieve that
2 terms. BJP was very much emboldened with the fact that it has got a brute majority, but this time it has formed its government with the support of other allies. So it's very much imminent, and it will be seen also during the budget that Nirmala Sitharaman keeps more focus.
You stay on with me, because it's not just about, remember, the special status that you are telling us. The coalition partners in Odisha, in Bihar, in Andhra Pradesh will expect certain concessions, but also for Jammu and Kashmir, there's going to be expectations coming in. It's under the central government's rule, and that's also ahead of assembly elections. Will will also possibly find a mention in this budget. That's the visual on your screen. From 2019, the first budget speech that had come in. What started with a briefcase, now to a Bahi Khata. You're looking at how not only there's been a transformation from the briefcase to the Bahi Khata and then to digital, but even look at Nirmala Sitharaman. Dark hair to grey hair perhaps is reflective of the years of experience, wisdom and the toll that this job often also takes. Remember, on you are banking the expectations of, there are hundreds of sectors. That's the first visual of Nirmala Sitharaman, dressed in a crisp white and red sari, Sakshi. Of course, not a word right now, but you tell me, you know, I look at more about the political overtones here, about how it's a coalition, about the expectations of the partners and the opposition. She gets down, not reacting right now, a stoic silence, walks in. How much do you think, as a budget day, this day is crucial for the FM?
Absolutely, this is going to be crucial. It's going to be historic because it is her 7th budget, a historic for any finance minister in India. Now, will this really meet the historic expectations that one can hope to get for the Indian economy, which is at the cusp of moving towards a developed economy, a Viksit Bharat that we are talking about, 2047. I think Anmol Bali is now with us from the Finance Ministry to get us all the live action. We've just seen Anmol, Finance Minister, walk into the North Block. What is the kind of mood around her? What were her expressions like? Does she look confident enough to deliver a prudent, a fiscally prudent, a growth-oriented budget this time around? Do tell us what is the sense that you're getting.
Pooja, just few hours are left for the Modi 3.0 first budget, and as you can see in the visuals currently, I am here outside the Finance Ministry, and Nirmala Sitharaman, the Finance Minister, the man of the day, has just arrived here. She will be presenting budget just few hours after. It will be seen that around 11 a.m. she will be delivering the budget speech in the Parliament, and there are various expectations by the experts on this issue. Some people are saying this budget will be for the Garib, Mahila, Yuva, Kisan, and various other experts are also predicting that this budget will have some relief for the taxpayers as well as relief for the private sector. More focus will be on infrastructure, more focus will be on the railways and the other areas like research. But I'll show you in the visuals outside the Finance Ministry, as you can see. And few minutes ago, Pankaj Chaudhary, MOS Finance, has also arrived here, and while talking to media while leaving his residence at the KG Marg, he has said this budget is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas wala budget, and this is a national interest budget, Rashtra Hit ka budget. So from here you can understand the vision of the government for the budget this year.
Absolutely.
Anmol, stay on with me because these are the visuals coming in, left from her residence. First stop is at the Ministry of Finance. This is where we are going to have the visual, the first visual before she enters into the Parliament with that Bahi Khata, so to say. Of course, it's a protocol, it's a symbolism, it's a photo opportunity, but this has been a tradition as well. And what a fine tradition for a country. Remember, India, still a fairly young nation.
Yeah.
The manner in which it has been able to put down the colonial baggage and the new baggage that it's lifted. It's interesting, Sakshi, isn't it? Because to have a vision for your country, we have the kind of neighbor nations we have, and then to not only face all of that, but also to ensure that you're constantly progressing. And a lot of that is on the budget.
Absolutely. And Pooja, this time around, it'll be the first time that they will be facing internal pressures as well. Something that was not there for the last 10 years. They were comfortable. Modi government had a vision of their own. They spent the money on the country just the way they wanted to, wherever they wanted to. And largely for these last budgets that the government has presented, they have largely stayed away from any tilt towards populism. And that is what has been the saving grace for the country and the economy at large, which is why, despite problems like COVID-19, which were massive, unprecedented issues that occurred, our country and our economy is far more stable and in a better shape when you compare with the developed world and even compared to the other emerging markets as well. Now, whether this will change is the big question right now. Will the government continue to face flack on jobs, or will they really deliver this time around? Will they be able to appease to a large population, which is from the farmers' side, from the women's side, from the poor, from the youngsters as well, is going to be extremely important to watch. They have a big booty. They are comfortable. They have a large collection from direct, indirect taxes. They have this large booty from the Reserve Bank of India as well. What are they going to do? How are they going to be deploying all this fund, which can on the one hand propel the growth engine and on the other continue to appease to the larger public so that they can continue to stay on for the next 5 years comfortably with the allies and also probably look at a future beyond.
Sakshi, when we look at these visuals, you know, we're talking about the record 7th budget that this has been after C.V. Deshmukh or Morarji Desai, all of that she has broken as glass ceilings. But the fact is, let's also remember the criticism that has come at her. It's been immense. And to be able to fight all of that, to have the confidence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's after 1 year, every year, has given her that opportunity. And because it's finance, because it's budget, imagine the expectations on your shoulders compared to, I think, any other minister, any other portfolio, and that perhaps she's handled brilliantly, isn't it?
Yes.
You would know it better because
Absolutely.
you track these industries closely, but I think it's huge responsibility to manage year after year.
But this time around, she's a confident finance minister.
Why would you say that? Why do you think that's
because
happening?
the economy is in a firm footing. All the macroeconomic indicators, Pooja, are pointing out towards a comfortable, stable economy, and that is what was highlighted even in the economic survey that was presented just yesterday in the comments of the Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageshwaran, who constantly talked about, yes, we do face geopolitical pressures. Yes, we face pressures from outside, but our own story is intact. If we continue on the same path, which means that all the measures taken thus far have actually propelled the economy further, and therefore she's a comfortable and a confident finance minister today. But the only but is as far as the coalition pressures are concerned, which I believe if she manages to do well, we've actually seen on the Lok Sabha elections day, how the stock markets had crashed, Pooja.
Correct.
It was a sharp fall because there was a fear in the Indian economy and the stock markets that probably the government will not be a stable one. Probably there will be continued pressures from the allies.
Let's be very clear, whatever said and done, there have been a lot of ups and downs India has faced, but you're right, what a growth story. Even China, that's known to be a better, stronger economy, did face a lot of, the dips that happened in the past few years, specifically in economy, that even India had managed to retain a certain stability despite our population, despite the COVID pandemic. Europe and American economies have seen such a fall. And I think in that sense, India has managed to keep that stability. So fingers crossed on that. Let's, touch wood and fingers crossed, all of that when we talk of Indian economy, because remember, that's the benchmark, that's the backbone of how this country is run. I want to go across to Anmol Bali. Anmol, there is this tradition of halwa that is eaten by our policymakers because it's the start of anything good. That happens about 10 days before,
yes,
I think, Sakshi.
A week before is when it happens.
I hope we also get some halwa, like people get some
the budget is
after
presented.
the budget. I also want to enjoy some halwa with some good news. But what do you think? Like Sakshi and I have been discussing, Anmol, there will be a certain coalition pressure. There will be the opposition pressure, and the government has to take that all in consideration. It cannot ignore that.
Pooja, recently it was seen that MOS Finance Pankaj Chaudhary has just denied that Bihar could not get the special status, and it was seen that as the government 3.0 government formed due to the seats given by the coalition partners like Chandrababu Naidu's party and JDU in Bihar, and they have clearly their leaders were clearly saying that from the very first day that since the Modi 3.0 government came to power that they need the special status. But yes, this will be the very first time that Modi government is going to present a budget where their party is a coalition under the NDA, not by the Bharatiya Janata Party, and various experts are expecting that various other sectors like railway, retail, manufacturing, technology, mobile technology will be more focused for the more job-oriented growth, because it was seen that later various of the researchers have said that Indian economy is a jobless, growing economy, but now the government is going to more focus on more job-oriented economy and their main focus. And in this budget, Nirmala Sitharaman is also going to break one record, because in past, Morarji Desai, who has presented around 5 annual budget, 1 interim budget, holded record of consecutive presenting the budget. But now Nirmala Sitharaman, the Finance Minister of India, will be presenting her 7th budget, consecutive as well as the interim. So she'll be also breaking the record. But now the more focus, according to experts and sources, will be on the technology, on the retail sector, on the green energy, on the EV sector and various other sectors.
Because like you're rightly pointing out, Anmol, if you're looking at 2047 vision, we have to also look at different sectors collectively. There has to be the agricultural sector, but there's also be the industries, the highways that in many ways will connect India to the larger world. Karishma also continues to be with us. Sakshi, would you want to take a question from Karishma?
Absolutely, Karishma. You know, the one thing that the government has actually not met expectations in the previous budgets is as far as the disinvestment target is concerned. What is the expectation this time around? I remember having a conversation with you, about 10 days ago, where you did highlight that this entire space could be done away with in the new budget. Is that still the status?
Sakshi, the expectation is to not have an expectation on disinvestment, because for
any other portfolio, and that perhaps she's handled brilliantly, isn't it?
Yes.
You would know it better because
Absolutely.
you track these industries closely, but I think it's huge responsibility to manage year after year.
But this time around, she's a confident finance minister.
Why would you say that? Why do you think that's
because
happening?
the economy is in a firm footing. All the macroeconomic indicators, Pooja, are pointing out towards a comfortable, stable economy, and that is what was highlighted even in the economic survey that was presented just yesterday in the comments of the Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageshwaran, who constantly talked about, yes, we do face geopolitical pressures. Yes, we face pressures from outside, but our own story is intact. If we continue on the same path, which means that all the measures taken thus far have actually propelled the economy further, and therefore she's a comfortable and a confident finance minister today. But the only but is as far as the coalition pressures are concerned, which I believe if she manages to do well, we've actually seen on the Lok Sabha elections day, how the stock markets had crashed, Pooja.
Correct.
It was a sharp fall because there was a fear in the Indian economy and the stock markets that probably the government will not be a stable one. Probably there will be continued pressures from the allies.
Let's be very clear, whatever said and done, there have been a lot of ups and downs India has faced, but you're right, what a growth story. Even China, that's known to be a better, stronger economy, did face a lot of, the dips that happened in the past few years, specifically in economy, that even India had managed to retain a certain stability despite our population, despite the COVID pandemic. Europe and American economies have seen such a fall. And I think in that sense, India has managed to keep that stability. So fingers crossed on that. Let's, touch wood and fingers crossed, all of that when we talk of Indian economy, because remember, that's the benchmark, that's the backbone of how this country is run. I want to go across to Anmol Bali. Anmol, there is this tradition of halwa that is eaten by our policymakers because it's the start of anything good. That happens about 10 days before,
yes,
I think, Sakshi.
A week before is when it happens.
I hope we also get some halwa, like people get some
budget is
after the budget. I also want to enjoy some halwa with some good news. But what do you think? Like Sakshi and I have been discussing, Anmol, there will be a certain coalition pressure. There will be the opposition pressure, and the government has to take that all in consideration. It cannot ignore that.
Pooja, recently it was seen that MOS Finance Pankaj Chaudhary has just denied that Bihar could not get the special status, and it was seen that as the government, 3.0 government formed due to the seats given by the coalition partners like Chandrababu Naidu's party and JDU in Bihar, and they have clearly their leaders were clearly saying that from the very first day that since the Modi 3.0 government came to power that they need the special status. But yes, this will be the very first time that Modi government is going to present a budget where their party is a coalition under the NDA, not by the Bharatiya Janata Party, and various experts are expecting that various other sectors like railway, retail, manufacturing, technology, mobile technology will be more focused focused for the more job-oriented growth, because it was seen that later various of the researchers have said that Indian economy is a jobless, growing economy, but now the government is going to more focus on more job-oriented economy, and their main focus. And in this budget, Nirmala Sitharaman is also going to break one record, because in past Morarji Desai, who has presented around 5 annual budget, 1 interim budget, holded record of consecutive presenting the budget, but now Nirmala Sitharaman, the Finance Minister of India, will be presenting her 7th budget, consecutive as well as the interim. So she'll be also breaking the record, but now the more focus, according to experts and sources, will be on the technology, on the retail sector, on the green energy, on the EV sector and various other sectors.
Right, like you're rightly pointing out, Anmol, if you're looking at 2047 vision, we have to also look at different sectors collectively. There has to be the agricultural sector, but there's also be the industries, the highways that in many ways will connect India to the larger world. Karishma also continues to be with us. Sakshi, would you want to take a question from Karishma?
Absolutely, Karishma. You know, the one thing that the government has actually not met expectations in the previous budgets is as far as the disinvestment target is concerned. What is the expectation this time around? I remember having a conversation with you, about 10 days ago, where you did highlight that this entire space could be done away with in the new budget. Is that still the status?
Sakshi, the expectation is to not have an expectation on disinvestment, because formally, officially, the government has done away with the fact that they are going to have a disinvestment target, because as announced in the last interim budget, they've decided that disinvestment is going to be under the miscellaneous non-capital receipts, and no more it's going to be a game of targets, which means that government is slightly skeptical on how this policy, this reform has turned out. Now the fact that they have set a 51,000 crore target for this year, that is FY25, will include not only just what they get from the sale receipts, but also dividends and also from the asset monetization, which now makes it easy for them, because they will not be critically checked upon the fact that they've not completed their target. But what is on the pipeline is the IDBI bank disinvestment, which apparently may take some pace this financial year. Now, if that takes pace, then it's about 26,000 crore directly in government's kitty, which will make up to all the targets that they've not fulfilled in the last 3 to 4 years. So while disinvestment is important, we need to definitely oblige the fact that government is trying to go light on it now.
All right, interesting. Karishma, keep us updated with all that's unfolding. Anmol Bali is also at the Parliament. And through the day, it's going to be constant updates, top perspectives, top newsmakers, only on India Today. The visual of Nirmala Sitharaman to come out in just a short while. Sakshi, it's going to be a big day. And throughout the day, you can catch Sakshi and all our colleagues at Business Today, digital live stream as well. Sakshi, do you think it's going to be a lot of expectations as we now head into a brief break and return with Rahul Kawal and Rajdeep Sardesai?
Absolutely, Pooja. And you know that 9 a.m. is when the stock markets will open with a lot of hopes this time around. At least no bad news should come in. That should not falter the kind of pre-budget rally that we've been seeing. Record high moves on the stock markets. Just like how you're pointing out and we are flashing on your screens, it's going to be Nifty, Nation, all of those things.
And Naukri.
And Naukri as well. That's going to be extremely important. Yes. And that is something that we will continue to get you live on India Today and on Business Today television. Stay tuned, viewers.
Today Media Institute believes in training students in independent and critical thinking so they can better analyze the world around them. The training at the ITMI is rigorous and multimedia with an aim to provide top-notch media professionals.
Register now at www.indiatodaymediainstitute.in or call on 95600 65465.
Breaking news coming in all live.
While there is a lot of technical jargon that you will keep us updated with, but my focus and
उस सपने को पूरा करने की मजबूत नींव वाला बजट लेकर के हम कल देश के सामने आएंगे।
All right, so there you heard it from the Prime Minister. He is hoping for a historic budget that will be for the Viksit Bharat. Let me now go across to our reporter who's been covering the developments at the North Block at the Finance Ministry, Karishma Sudani, now joining in. Karishma, very good morning to you. Action already picking up at the North Block. I can see you talking to a lot of people right there. Do tell me, what is the mood right now? Of course, the nation has a long list of wish lists and expectations. Will the Finance Minister be able to give some relief to the Aam Aadmi while also staying on the fiscally prudent path this time around? What's your scene?
Sakshi, this budget is going to be a revised budget and could be a big bang budget, noting that last 5 budgets have missed big bang announcements, especially for the middle class on the tax cut. It looks like government is going to look at fiscal consolidation along with some relief for sectors in order to uplift the economy. You saw the Echo survey numbers yesterday, a 6.5 to 7%, quite a conservative growth target that they have set. It looks like they're pretty confident on the fiscal consolidation path on what they're going to do in terms of macroeconomics. Their fiscal deficit could further go down. They could try and aim for further increase allocation towards certain social schemes. They could also look at higher direct and indirect taxes owing to the buoyancy on the revenue side. But when it comes to the people of India, to the middle class sector, it is very well on cards that there could be some cushioning done on the income tax front today. What is going to be interesting is to watch out for if government is going to try and bringing any kind of further exemptions or relief under the new regime, because that has been their focus now. While for corporate there has been some good news recently, but for the individual salaried taxpayer, it's always been a set of disappointments for the last few budgets, but looks like this could pave way for some kind of green shoots in a way that there could be some relief on cuts.
Let's also listen in now to some experts because, in the past few days, specifically since yesterday, since the economic survey, there's been a lot of chatter, a lot of discussion. India Today's Rahul Kanwal exclusively spoke to V. Anant Nageshwaran, Chief Economic Advisor, on the big expectations this budget. Let's listen in.
What you think really ought to be done to deal with the jobs challenge? We are hearing a lot about employment-linked incentives, ELIs, to complement the production-linked incentives, that companies should have incentives so that when they hit a certain number of employment creation, then they get incentives. Do you think that's one way of potentially addressing this challenge? How do you think the job crisis should be dealt with?
No, there are multiple interventions that can be undertaken with the aim of creating employment. It is a function of continued economic growth. It is a function of corporate sector's investments. It is a function of the real estate markets doing well, which creates construction jobs. So there are multiple touch points that have impact on employment. From the point of view from the government action, of course, the survey has mentioned the importance of deregulation as a very important aspect that frees up entrepreneurial resources, both time and in terms of financial, to be able to create employment. The second aspect is employment is also influenced by long-term transformations like technological developments. And that is where the corporate sector also has to find the right balance between capital share at work and labor share at work in their businesses. And we showed that corporate profits have gone up in the aggregate by nearly 4 times between FY20 and FY23. Therefore, there is more room for them to hire workers, create incomes for them, which feeds back into better demand for their own products. And so I think the answer to your question is that employment generation is a matter of good, appropriate skilling, where government, private sector, academia have to come together. And employment creation is a matter of easing operating conditions for businesses, especially small and mid-sized businesses. And third, employment generation is a matter of how corporates and commercial businesses deploy technology to the extent that they are labor augmenting rather than labor displacing.
Dr. Nageshwaran, in the economic survey, you also write about the challenges posed by artificial intelligence, particularly to India's service sector exports. Just now you spoke about the need for deregulation. In the survey, you write about deregulation at the local, the state, and the central level. I want to understand from your framework the potential you think having a coalition government, rather than a government with a full majority, a coalition government and fractious federal relations, all these having on the prospects for deregulation. A, what kind of deregulation do you have in mind? And do you think we're now in a fractious coalition framework could push back some of the economic reform? Dr. Nageshwaran.
First of all, these are actions that can be taken suo motu by state governments, and whether we have a full majority government or a coalition government is not a factor in this, and state governments in the past have indeed done so with respect to business facilitation legislations, presumptive approvals, etc. So it is possible. And that doesn't depend on the kind of governments we have over here at the union government level. And as to what kind of regulations they are, we have given some examples in the survey chapter. See, ultimately it comes in having too many prescriptive rules for businesses. I mean, there are several legislation that prescribe even the amount of space that businesses have to allocate for receiving inventory, raw material inventory, production space, and finished goods inventory, etc. So it's important to move away from such prescriptive rules to principle-based regulations, especially when it comes to non-financial businesses. That is the kind of direction in which we have to move towards. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, I mean, it is still a work in progress in terms of understanding the implications it has for labor market, for employment generation. But it is very important for Indian point of view to make a distinction again between areas where it can expand employment, and for that what kind of preparatory work we need to do, and also understand that ultimately the cost of artificial intelligence cannot simply be measured in terms of productivity gains and bottom line gains for the corporate sector, because ultimately if it is going to be creating adverse impact on employment generation and income growth, it does feed back into the corporate sector in terms of lower demand and lower sales growth for themselves. So I think all countries are struggling with finding the right balance between deployment of new technologies and their implications for employment markets, job markets, and it has also got implications for the share of income accruing to capital in terms of profits and share of income accruing to labor. So I think over time, we have to figure out, depending on the kind of impact it has, well, a mix of carrots and sticks and incentives and disincentives may need to be adopted to ensure that the social balance is not unduly disrupted.
So through the day, remember, there's going to be a lot of numbers that are going to come in from the budget. So let me first begin this telecast about the numbers we need to know, which are already existing. For example, the GDP. Because with regard to the GDP in here...
jobs for India's youth.
Okay, I want to get in a word from our reporters. Karishma Asudani joins us from right outside the Finance Ministry, which is where Nirmala Sitharaman is at this moment. Karishma, from your sources in the Finance Ministry, what are you picking up about the different pulls and pressures that have been at play in the build-up to the budget and the expectations those within government have from the Finance Minister when she steps up to present her record 7th successive budget?
Rahul, continuity is the main idea behind this budget, and this is what the budget makers have been vocal about for the last 5 to 6 years, that they're going to maintain policy continuity along the fiscal consolidation path. If you see the numbers, 5.1% is the fiscal deficit target that they have set. Sources hint us that this could further go below to about 4.9 to 5%, which will be big, because this is something the credit rating agencies have been not been able to accept, about India setting big numbers and close fiscal deficit numbers. Now, the ECHO survey also talked about a decent conservative growth target of 6.5 to 7%, which means that government is ready to see a big bang number after the year end. So today's budget could be probably a vision to this, that they're going to stay low, but they're going to make big announcement. But what's going to matter the most is the Andhra and Bihar flavor that could actually add to this whole recipe of revised budget?
One, of course, is the obsession and the focus on the fiscal deficit numbers, which the government's been very careful about, and that's helped in bond inflows from abroad. But there's also political pressure now, because the RBI has given to the government higher dividend than was originally expected. So the government has some extra elbow room in terms of being able to make more capital expenditure. The question is, where do you spend that money? Do you spend it on social sector schemes? Do you spend it on infrastructure? Or do you try and introduce some labor-related incentives? It's been called the employment-linked incentives. Bring some ELIs on the lines of production-linked incentives so that if you create employment, you get incentives.
Well, Rahul, I think it's very important that she has to do this deft balancing act. On one hand, she has been actually given that 2.11 lakh crore bonanza by the Reserve Bank of India. I think what I expect is that there will be a balance between infrastructure spends and spends on welfare, because she has that little elbow room right now. So revenue expenditure, in my view, will be a little bit, she will have that little bit of flexibility to look at some of these areas where welfare spending, and therefore remember, we talked about a consumption conundrum. Now the rural distress, the consumption demand has to be pepped up, and if you look at yesterday's, I would say it's a bold economic survey which was put out. They have talked about jobs, they have talked about, that whole construct which needs to be done between private sector, government and the states. Everybody together has to be pumping it up. So I think this time she will have a little bit of leeway to look at welfare spending in a bit, which will also, which is aimed at boosting demand and ameliorating the rural distress.
Your expectations. What is it that you're looking forward to? Am I right in saying that for once the mood is a little bit more tempered?
Well, first of all, if you look historically, they've either been pre-budget rallies and post-market corrections, or pre-budget corrections and post-market rallies. So this time around, I'm noticing a little bit of the pre-budget correction. So market mood is a little tepid. The waiting and watching what more can happen, because there's already been a lot that's been given to the market participants.
What is it that they're looking for?
No, but can I point something out? Remember, the SEBI chairperson, Madhuri Puri Boch, the RBI, multiple regulators, including the finance ministry and in the economic survey, they've spoken of gambling instinct. The fact that a lot of retail investors are participating in speculative trading through derivatives, and this is something the government and regulators now seem to be concerned about. Harsh Madhusudan Gupta, are you concerned that given that everyone's speaking about it, there's now an echo system that can be heard saying this is dangerous, we need to clamp down, 9 out of 10 of these retail investors indulging in speculative trades are losing money, we need to step in and help out. Is that the government's likely instinct, or they'll have a more Gujarati, let them burn their fingers, they'll learn their way, and akal khud tikane aayegi?
I'm not sure what's Gujarati about that, but I...
No, but because that's I'll tell you why I'm saying it. That's like more free enterprise, which would be one impulse. One is a Gujarati free enterprise mindset. The other is a nanny mindset, which says, no, put laws, put taxes. Those are live pictures of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman out holding the budget papers for the first time, along with the Minister of State for Finance, Pankaj Chaudhary, and her team surrounding her right behind. But please go on and explain.
Yes, I think on the FNO, derivatives trading side, the issue is more on the short term. For example, weekly options were introduced relatively recently, and most of the increase in volumes is on de facto zero-day expiry. Basically, things which are genuinely close to gambling as opposed to taking a long-term speculative view or a hedging view. So I think the government will try to do something with taxes or regulations, not just in the budget, but SEBI separately on that. However, it must be said that all anxieties, as you said, about any particular instrument should not just be a moral anxiety. It should be an empirical, rigorously defined anxiety about that particular thing. And I think right now consultations are happening. The government is unlikely to do something very draconian, but maybe just tilt the balance using taxes, and SEBI separately might do something on the short term.
What do you think makes sense? If there is some kind of an announcement in the budget, like in the previous instance, we saw the government clamp down on cryptocurrencies. To what extent could that temper the enthusiasm we've seen in the markets?
Well, first of all, I don't think dealing with options is a finance ministry issue, and they shouldn't really be discussing that in the budget. It's a SEBI regulatory issue. And yes, there is a lot of speculation, and we've seen that in the early days of any markets. In the 90s, Asia, Korea, Taiwan, all of these, it was very commonly known that the women were like becoming day traders. And now we are seeing some of that happen in India. Like everybody, even doctors are now trading and doing their work part-time. So a lot of people are making a lot of money.
Or losing money.
Or losing money. And F&O, frankly, is different than long-term investing. It's very different. It requires technical market analysis skills that most people are not trained for. So I think more education would be helpful, but clamping down is not the right way to allow free market to operate.
So Rajiv Kumar's been involved with the government in the Niti Aayog, understands the thinking within the government as we see these images. Rajiv ji, your best understanding of the government's impulse on this. One is, let them burn their fingers, they will learn their ways, they'll pull back. The other is, no, these youngsters are losing too much money, we must step in and protect them.
But Rahul, I can't see how the government can step in and protect them. That's the issue. The budget is not an instrument to do that at all. There's no way to do that. So what you need to do is what the economic survey is doing already, which is to sound out these warnings. To get, as Punita said, to get the education going. And education is not necessarily in classrooms. Education is about leading economists and policymakers saying that retail investment is about long-term holdings and F&O is not your option, and that's enough.
The interesting thing is you've got Subhash Garg there, who's been involved in multiple budget-making exercises. He's shaking his head vigorously and disagreeing with the conversation so far. Yes?
The government is very much against the instinctive gambling and the gaming kind of thing. You saw how the government dealt with the online gaming and the real money game. What is happening in the F&O market now is very close to that gaming which is going on. And the government, how did the government dealt with it, that online gaming? By tweaking the tax regime. They made that every stake you play is taxable and raise the tax rates. Online, the F&O has one of the lowest taxation rates currently. If the government wants to actually bust this, it can very easily do by bringing an appropriate tax regime.
Okay, so what we'll do is...
Rahul, yes. A transaction tax is not the best tax in the world. The security transactions tax has been imposed. You can raise it a wee bit if you like. But there is no way that you can stop or prevent people trading by that marginal play on that security transaction tax. This is what you need is a much
But the government has used tax as a hammer in the case of cryptocurrencies, and therefore that potential fear from the perspective of youngsters who are indulging in F&O activities would exist. But the fact also is that 9 out of 10 of these day traders are losing money. So that's also a fact. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to kick the budget intelligence dashboard into action. What we'll do, like we did during the elections, is that we'll load this in with live numbers, update it as the budget papers are presented, so you'll have a sense of what's really changed in terms of allocations. I'll start with a look at how the markets are doing. They've been at record highs and there's been a build-up which is sustained, leading to questions, Punita, about whether the markets now are overpriced and whether, because of the current price-earning ratios, we're heading towards a scenario where some kind of correction is only inevitable. The stock markets have run way more than what the logical prices would be.
Well, definitely the market valuations in India have been high now for over a year. So it's not like anything to do with the budget. In fact, there's been a little bit more of a tempering in the mood after the elections. And also what is happening in the global markets. What's happening in the US is preoccupying a lot of investors with what's happening in the presidential election. So it is not just India specific, but globally there has been a little bit of pullback from the really overly optimistic market scenario that we've had last year. I think the earnings have come in pretty good. So that's not a concern. The corporate sector is healthy. Really, only what we need to focus is on valuations, and the market is priced for perfection. So any negative news today will not go down well at all, just like we saw on the election day. Okay. So that's what we need.
Let's focus on consumption, because that's something that the build up to the budget has seen a lot of conversation around. And I'm looking currently at private consumption expenditure, which has in financial year 24 grown only on a year-on-year basis by 4%. In FY22, it grew at 11.7%, also aided by a low base effect because it had gone into negative territory in financial year 21, but is currently growing at only 4%. if I look at FMCG sales, and we've seen a lot of companies in the investor calls, analyst calls, talk about how, especially in rural areas, they haven't seen as much consumption and demand as they would have expected. In financial year 23, food and agro-based product sales grew year on year only at 8.3%. In FY22, they grew at 21.2%. Subhash Garg, how much of a concern is this for budget makers at this moment? There's been a lot of talk during the election, the opposition's hitting on this, that there is rural distress, that there is income inequality, the rich are getting richer, the poorer don't have money to be able to spend. And how do you think the government and the finance minister could possibly attempt to fix this?
I think this is the biggest Achilles heel for the government. 5 years consumption growth is 4.5%, the Modi 2.0. And as you pointed out in the last year, 23-24 also, when the GDP was growing at 8.2%, the consumption was hardly 4% plus. This is a real concern. I think the government should recognize and go into the reasons why this is so.
What can the finance minister do?
That's a difficult call, but what you can do is, number one, spend more on improving the consumption of the poor. You do some schemes, if you can realign
like
them
what?
better. You do
more handouts. One of the ideas is increase Kisan Nidhi from 6,000 rupees to 8,000 rupees.
So that is one segment which is largely 75 to 80% of India's population, which is consuming less. Then middle class is also consuming less. It's investing in housing and others, but it's consuming relatively less because it has stress on the higher personal tax payments, etc. Can you put some little more money into the hands of the middle class?
Saurav, you had a cover story on the consumption conundrum. Briefly explain to our viewers tuning in right now what Business Today found in that cover story on how corporates had an empty basket and that consumption wasn't growing in the way that they would have thought, and what this reflects about the larger economy.
Yes, I think that's the key issue, like Mr. Garg said, which this budget will hope to address. Because the FMCG companies, just to take one element, you are seeing at the higher end, demand is all right. But at the lower end, at the middle end, there is definitely stress in terms of demand, which is why we call it a conundrum. While top end is working well, luxury cars, luxury housing and all of that, there is stress at the bottom. What needs to be done really is to put more money in the hands of the middle class, and the rural, the distress has to be addressed.
But Siddharth, does the government acknowledge that there is a consumption issue? Because a lot of data points are being cited to suggest that no, rural consumption isn't down in the way that some of these economists and analysts are suggesting. And secondly, what do you think the government could do to boost consumption?
So on the first part of your question, when we speak to people, policy makers, they point out that you have to discount 2.5 years of COVID from 2019 till 2024 and use that as a peg to say that something went different in the economy. Savings built up during the COVID period because most of us didn't have occasion and opportunity to spend. Once COVID got lifted, that money went out in droves. There was another, I would say, a sociological phenomenon where young people using technology said that a fixed deposit is far too boring for their interest. They instead went to mutual funds or direct equity investing, and within direct equity investing, Ash made that point, went into the riskiest because their risk appetite is the most when you're 21, 22 years and making money initially. I think the consumption issue is also to be dealt with by recognizing the fact that prices have gone up. One of India's largest FMCG companies, Dabur, had to actually cut prices and then its rural demand went up. Take Godrej, for example. I can go through a list of and look at what has happened to prices across sectors. Saurav will bear me out on this. Automobiles. Average 40% increase over the past 2 years because input costs have gone up. China disruption. So if all of that is happening to corporates, wage growth has not gone up so much for the average person. And if net job creation at a higher consumption end is not growing that fast, how will consumption happen? And therefore, to expect so much from the budget is perhaps wrong. And just one last point, Rajdeep. Are we therefore saying that should companies be forced to lower prices? Are we going back to a command control economy? No. So it's a very difficult point.
But we are now 3 years from from COVID. You see, government policy makers have, you're right, suggested that those 2 years effectively changed people's sort of consumption, saving habits, affected people psychologically. But now, 2 years on, you can't turn back and say what happened in 2020 to 2021 is reflecting in the slowdown in consumption. So now the government has to look ahead.
So Rajdeep, I started on your show today to say that what is most important is a 5-year roadmap, if not a 25-year roadmap, because you can't refer to the past to expand on present policy. Present policy requires future steps, and that is what is, I think, the most important part of the budget.
So in the interest of time, I don't want to get stuck on just one aspect of the budget. I want to move the needle now to investment. I want to take you through what the data is saying and then try and understand from our pundits of what can be done by the government. So here's gross fixed capital formation. How much money is being pumped into capital formation? So it's used as investment. Now this has been a flat line. If you see in FY22 it was 33.4%. It stays relatively flat. In FY25 the forecast is 33.2%. Typically when corporate taxes were reduced, the government would have expected that India Inc. will invest more in the India story. There are some signs of uptick, Rajiv Kumar, but not in the way policymakers would like. Now, through her conversations at different industry chambers, she's been nudging industry to invest more. That hasn't helped in the way the government would want, because once industry invests, jobs get created. In this budget, what do you think the government can do potentially to spur investment?
Investment is an aggregate demand problem. You've got to increase the aggregate demand in the economy for the capacity utilization to increase.
So I'll show that. Okay.
And therefore the investment will follow.
So
investment will not follow otherwise.
No, so I'll show the data for capacity utilization. I'm just trying to de-jargonize to the extent possible for our viewers. Now, what you're seeing here is capacity utilization of all the units of production. At what percentage do industry titans feel the need to start investing in fresh capacity? The general theory is when capacity utilization comes into the mid-70s, that is when industry starts investing in new production capacity. Now, the interesting thing here is capacity utilization has been in the mid-70s for a very long time. From March 22, if you look at where capacity utilization has been, it's been in the mid-70s. At December 23, it was 74.7%. So it's been said, Harsh, yes.
Capacity utilization has to nudge 80% and above.
So why is the needle not moving then?
The needle is not moving because the demand is not there. And the demand is not there because the consumption is not there. Consumption is not increasing because people's permanent income hypothesis, their expectation of continuity in their jobs is not there. So what you need to do is ultimately to crack the employment conundrum, not the consumption conundrum. Because the consumption
How do you crack the employment conundrum? That's much easier said than done, because there are other trends at play. Artificial intelligence, some of these service-type export jobs now being under threat and pressure. So how should the government deal with the employment conundrum?
One issue which has been an issue, especially I would say the last 18 months or so, has been a relative macro tightness. So for example, right now the RBI short-term rate is 650 basis points. Core inflation is 300 odd basis points. You know, the deflator in FY24 was 1% or so. It's just that the food price inflation are high, which is a large component of CPI. And the CPI, the way it is measured as on 2012 weights. The government has just announced in the economic survey, it will redo the CPI weights with the base year of 2024. And all surveys show that food consumption as a percentage of the average Indian's basket has gone down. So what is happening is we have old data. That old data is leading to policy making, whereas the deflator and the WPI itself will get converted into a PPI, what is known as a double deflator. Basically, we have a very high real inflation-adjusted interest rates in India, which was needed for FY23, but in FY24 it has been a bit overdone. Now maybe we don't say that openly, but we are basically waiting for the Fed to cut interest rates.
Even the member of the Monetary Policy Committee, Jayant Verma, has sort of said very clearly that we are now got...
Ashima Goyal as well. Two people dissented.
You know, have said that now we have very high real interest rates, you know, when you deflate them by the real inflation. That's one policy issue that you can tackle. The other one is to somehow, and there are various measures to actually lower the real interest rate for the unorganized sector. which is still borrowing at 3% a month.
Yes.
And that has to be done.
In 2018, when
the Mudra loans were a point to it, but you have to go deeper into the Mudra loan and say what has happened to it. How much of it is gone? What is the unit size of that Mudra loan? Can it create capacity, or is it just used for working capital?
Just very quickly, in 2018, when CPI was actually very low and core CPI was high.
Once again, I must tell all our guests that when you say consumer price index, etc., please explain what you're trying to say, so we don't lose our viewers.
Okay, this is India today, it's not business today. So let me just say that inflation was very low in 2018, then core inflation was high. The opposite of what is today.
Can I just show that? Because that's why I love the budget intelligence dashboard. We can actually look at what's being said. Otherwise, this is just talk which doesn't really register in the way that it should. So I'll take a look first at consumer price index. Now, this is suggesting how much the consumers are having to pay more relative to the past. So the forecast for financial year 25 is that the consumer price index would be at 4.3%. That would be the increase. Now, I want to look at food inflation, which is what was mentioned just now. If you look at food inflation, this is the year-on-year change. Food inflation is much higher at 7.49. So the point that Harsh is making is that your core inflation is lesser, your food inflation is higher. And now what the economic survey is speaking about is that keep food inflation aside, look at core inflation rather than looking at food inflation. But the problem is it's food inflation that impacts the Aam Aadmi the most, and that's something which at this moment is going up. And the government, I must explain, has a second challenge to deal with. The moment you clamp down on food inflation, you typically make it unremunerative for farmers. Now we've already seen whether it's onion farmers in Maharashtra, whether it is paddy, you want for farmers to be able to export because that's how they earn money. You keep clamping down on every money-making opportunity for farmers, that's not good either.
800 million people are getting subsidized, almost free food grains. Unfortunately, that does not reflect in the inflation data. Yes. So what is happening is the government is spending on the fisc, but it is not benefiting on the monetary side the way the data is structured. So the 800 million people getting almost free food.
Subhash Garg disagrees, but the problem with some of these arguments is that the data has been calculated the same way for many years. You're supposed to move the needle with the data in the way that it's been calculated. Because the data is not delivering the results you want, you then start questioning the way the data is calculated, which is not to say it's an unreasonable question, but move the needle in the way the data has always been calculated because that's your baseline. But yes, Subhash Garg.
No, that's, I think it's partially not correct. Actually, the cereal prices, which is what basically the food grains are in the FPS system, that element is actually calculated into the food index. So to what you see today, food price index going up is because the remaining consumption
mostly
of
vegetables.
Cereals. No, even cereals.
Yes.
Even cereals, because the remaining cereal...
but the subsidies are not fully reflected in
the data. There is a weight which is assigned to how much is subsidized food and how much is non-subsidized food.
That weight has not been updated.
The non-subsidized food actually is rising much sharper.
Yes.
And you see the wheat prices in the market? What is happening today? Because there is an undercurrent in the economy that the production number of wheat which is being touted about are actually not the case.
Okay.
Despite the export.
I just wanted to add that we are very focused on food inflation in India and making it like an India-centric problem, but it is actually a global problem. So it is not necessarily that our policies are causing food inflation. There's a supply side issue across the world.
The global food prices are on the decline in last 1.5 years. They went up very sharply in 22-23, 21-22 and 22-23. But now they're back. The latest index is about 106% only on food.
But not at the consumer level. The consumer is still not seeing the lower prices.
Ukraine, the wheat disturbance which took place has now settled down.
Actually, the economic survey has a beautiful chart to show that all commodity prices actually are in the decline.
Exactly, the economic survey
but one of the points which was mentioned...
that benefits should be passed on to the consumer. And the point is that we focus too much on the food prices as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there are also the fuel prices, the headline inflation. Why isn't the lower commodity prices being passed on?
But you see, as Rahul said at the outset, there is a context to this budget. This budget comes against the backdrop of a below par performance in the elections. Right? Like, whichever way you stand, the government clearly was blindsided by what happened in the election results. Now you've got 3 states coming up between October and December. You can add Jammu and Kashmir. which the government desperately, this government needs to win at least 2 out of the 3. Because the moment you lose 2 out of the 3 state elections, then you are seriously even in political trouble. So there is a context. You look at the Maharashtra budget that came out earlier this month. There were handouts after handouts, none of which anyone described as Revdi.
And Radhi, in India, the inflation narrative is basically the food narrative, food inflation
So
narrative.
therefore, no, I said that in the context of an election. Because you've got an election coming up, this government cannot risk in the next few months food inflation in any way remaining where it is. They need to do something to try and give a sense at least that look, we've got the economy under control. Because otherwise in a state like Maharashtra...
But it's not that simple, Rajdeep. It's not that simple because the government through policy can clamp down on food inflation, but if that impacts onion exports in your state of Maharashtra, for example, that creates its own political backlash. So it's all political, yes, but that has its own counter backlash.
No, I was just saying in the context, Punita saying it's global. Yes, it's global, but we are a country where there are elections every few months. So every government tends to have one eye on what am I going to do to send out a message to my voters.
This inflation conundrum of what is called the top, the tomatoes, onion, potatoes, etc., has been tackled in the past by higher imports, and which the government has done in the past, because ultimately it is the supply-demand situation, and all of these are traded products, and the government can take that step now.
On wheat and rice, you have actually completely banned exports.
No,
in wheat for last 2 years.
My point was the RBI need not make interest rates based on food inflation.
Yes. So
that was the point.
Which is a fair point.
Cereals, our domestic consumption is actually about 80-85% of our production. And despite that, 2 years back, the government was so comfortable that it allowed the ethanol making from the wheat kind of thing. And today, you have banned exports. You have disallowed ethanol, etc., and yet the wheat prices are going up.
Well, you see, it was the banning of onion exports in North Maharashtra which cost the government badly in that.
The economic survey speaks about it. That when there is an opportunity for farmers, don't clamp down on it, don't come down on exports. Okay, I want to look at growth, and we look at growth in two ways. We look at how the Indian economy is growing, and then we'll place the Indian economy in a global context. So here is the GDP growth forecast which came out yesterday between 6.5 and 7%. So the forecast is at about 6.8% for financial year 25, which is this year. Last year, the economy grew at 8.2%. This would lead to conversation around over whether relative to last year, the economy is gradually slowing down. Obviously, and I just want to show the global context, everything, and the economic survey talks about this again and again, that everything is global. Yes, from last year, you're a little down, but if you look at what's happening in other countries, India is growing at 6.8%, the United States is growing at 2.7%, all of Europe taken together is growing at 1.4%, the United Kingdom only at 0.5%, Japan at less than 1%, the mighty Chinese economy at 4.6%. So relative to other economies, the Indian economy is still doing very well. Rajiv Kumar.
Yeah, but that's true. The Indian economy is doing very well. It's probably maybe even 7% in FY25. The question, however, is that sufficient? I think if you stayed it at 7%, you are doing very well.
Something that we see, Rajdeep, because you spoke of politics, the financial impulse of this government is very different from the political impulse, and I'll explain how. In the election season, they said, "Ab ki baar 400 par." So aim for the moon, and then let's see where you end up. In the budget context, even the IMF is saying India will grow at 7%. They could have taken a more aggressive target. What they're saying instead is 6.5 to 7. So explain that, Harsh, that the financial target setting impulse is one based on conservatism. The political target setting impulse is hit it out of the park and 400 par.
Under Nirmala Sitharaman, almost all budgets targets have been historically very conservative targets. The government is happy to surpass them. You are absolutely right in terms of setting expectations. So for example, last year also they were expecting around 7% GDP growth rate. We ended up having 8.2. In terms of tax buoyancy and nominal GDP growth rate also, they've historically sent very conservative numbers.
Why do they do that, Subhash Garg?
No, I think this is partly correct. The change took place in 21-22. If you go back to the first 3 years, the target setting was actually very high. Look at the disinvestment targets, 2 lakh crore kind of things in first 3 years. Look at the GDP target. The economic survey has a picture that In 21-22, it was 11%, which was missed out very badly. So first 3 years, it's not true that for all 5 years they have set.
Last
I think
few years.
they learned the lesson very well, that it doesn't make sense to over-project and then underperform.
So they've learned the lesson economically. Have they learned the same lesson politically? That will be very interesting. No, because Subhash Gar spoke of disinvestment. I want to take a moment to show the disinvestment numbers to our viewers. Now, it's very interesting how not just is the achievement coming down, the target setting itself has come down dramatically. For example, in financial year 21, the union government in the budget set a disinvestment target of 1.2 lakh crore rupees. They achieved only 27% of that. So it was a very poor achievement in terms of the targets that were set. In financial year 22, the target itself came down to 78,000 crore rupees, out of which they achieved even lesser, only 17%. In financial year 23, the target was reduced even further to 50,000 crore rupees. Then they achieved 71. So obviously your target achievement improves when your target itself comes down. In FY24, the target was only 30,000 crore rupees, out of which 55% was achieved. Why is this happening?
No, this is revised estimates. These are not budget estimates. Budget estimates are much higher, 2 lakh, 1.75 and 1.65 in 3 years.